folks, it's Don here. On this episode of The Naturalist, we're going to do something completely different, but it represents one of my interests, which is inspired by nature and helps blend a little bit about my interest in nature and art together. And that's the art of bonsai, okay, which is a term that simply means trees in pots. That's simple. And what we're going to do is try to create something like you see here today. This is a tree that I styled last summer from a dwarf Alberta spruce. All right, and so we're going to try to replicate this and show you how to do it with very simple tools and a little bit of wire, and to create something that is intended to mimic what nature does with age and wears and tears of the environment throughout the life of a tree. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so what you have in front of me here is a dwarf Alberta spruce. Okay, these are very popular small landscaping trees. They get to be, maybe 20 feet tall or so in a backyard situation. And people plant them often around new developments, new houses, because they're easy, small, cheap, and they look nice, okay, if this is the kind of thing you're going for in your landscaping. And this is the typical shape of what a young dwarf Alberta spruce would look like. And this is characteristic of many young trees. Okay, they're very densely branched with lots of foliage, and that branching pattern is very upright. Okay, as you can see, a lot of these branches are angled upward, which is very common for young trees, particularly young conifers. Of course, dwarf Alberta spruce is what we call a conifer, a cone-bearing plant. It's a gymnosperm in particular. And now, with age, if you look at a large, mature spruce tree, size and age and the insults of weather and ice and snow tends to pull branches down, okay, to the point where they are more parallel with the ground or may even droop toward the ground. Okay, and so the art of bonsai essentially is to take small, usually relatively young trees in terms of how old trees can get, and to make them look like large old trees. Okay, so that's the whole idea, is to take something like this, which is a tree, this is a nursery grown tree. It's probably about 5 years old or so. Okay, and make it look like an old kind of weather ravaged or impacted tree that's been around for 100 years. Okay, and of course, there are a variety of things you try to achieve in bonsai, a variety of rules, although there's nobody is checking your math, so to speak. In that sense, there aren't really any rules. You create something that is aesthetically pleasing to you. Unless you are trying to sell your bonsais, and then you want to create things that are aesthetically pleasing to others as well. But in any case, this is something that I've been curious about for a number of years, and then have been actively learning about and practicing for just the last couple years. Okay, and so what I'm going to do today is one of the really most simple things you can do. These are very good starter trees to do this with. And we're going to make what's called a formal upright bonsai, okay, which is a tree that doesn't have any crazy angles to it. It's just a normal upright looking tree. It'll have a Christmas tree kind of feel to it. So you could consider this my holiday special in the end. Okay. And so now all we really need in terms of tools to do this, there's all kinds of tools you can get if you get into bonsai, special branch cutters, root cutters, trimmers of various sorts. But most of what I do, I just use clippers, okay? Garden clippers. And I do have a set of other small tools that I will tap into occasionally, but really you can do almost everything with a set of clippers like this. These trees are good starter trees because they're very inexpensive. You can get them at any of your standard big box stores, or most nurseries would have these. They're cheap. This tree cost me about 12 bucks. You can get larger ones if you wish, more in the order of 20 to 30 bucks. But they're good starter trees because if you make a mistake, you haven't wasted a lot of money. Okay. Now, today I'm going to emphasize the styling of the above ground part of the tree. I'm not going to focus on dealing with the roots today and the potting. That's a whole separate concern that I will record in another episode. But you generally would do that closer to the start of the growing season. So we are today, it's December 10th, 2023. And I'm going to prune and style the above ground portion of this tree. Just leave it in the pot it was grown in, and then I'll put it into a more bonsai style pot in the late winter, early spring, before the tree would actually start to actively grow for the year. Okay, and again, bonsai pots, as you saw in my initial opening there, are typically shallow pots. They can be rectangular or oval or round. The root system is very is minimized and very restrained, and that keeps the tree small and appealing, and gives you an illusion of a large and old tree in a very small pot. Okay. All right. Now this tree is pretty simple. It has a little bit of challenge, a couple challenges to it, like it has two leaders. Okay, so we have to make some decisions. But I'll just take you through a few things I've learned and practiced. I've made just a few of these at this point, but they're good starter trees and a starter style to try to achieve. Okay, now one thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to cut this pot lower so we can get at the trunk and the upper roots. Okay, what you want to look at first. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this pot away. In bonsai, it's kind of interesting that what you're basically doing is heavily pruning a tree both above ground and below ground. And but if you return that tree then after you've done all that to a growth conducive condition, a good soil mix for bonsais to promote rooting, adequate moisture, some nutrients, the tree will recover. And the tree will recover from, like having half of its shoot material cut off, maybe half of its roots cut off. And so it's really, it's a testament to how resilient trees are, and a testament to the idea that if you see an insect that's eating a few holes in your tree, the leaves of your tree, it's not going to kill it generally. Okay, you can really quote torture trees, and they'll generally recover. Okay, so what I did is just removed a bit of that upper part of that pot, and I'm going to scrape away some of this upper soil and see what the roots look like, because the exposed roots at the base of the trunk is part of the appeal of bonsai as well. Okay, the root development and sort of its form and nature is something called nabari in bonsai culture. And so you're always on the lookout for good nabari. And but you can't really see what a tree has to offer until you get some of this soil pulled away. There's a lot of surface roots. These trees in these small pots tend to get root bound. That means they've been grown in this pot so long they fill the pot almost entirely with roots. And so there's a lot of roots there to take care of. I'm using just like a little rake tool right now to scrape away some of that soil. And really often you see in potted plants and potted trees that plants and trees are often planted too deep as it is. So you kind of have to really get down to what exactly is the base of the trunk. Okay, this is so root bound. It has roots coming back up into the upper soil and back down. We'll just get rid of some of that kind of stuff. I'm also going to get rid of some of the lower branches here that are going to be unnecessary. Generally, you want to expose about 1/4 to 1/3 of the base of the trunk of a tree, because the appearance of the trunk and the view of the trunk is very important in bonsai. That's part of the appeal, to see what looks like an old, thick, gnarly, twisted, sometimes scarred trunk that is an indicator, like I said earlier, of age. Gives the illusion of an large and old tree. Okay, so this smells great, by the way. So it's a very interesting thing to be doing in the holidays. Festive, almost. Okay, so got some of that away. There's no real particularly impressive root structure that I'm seeing here. Taking more of this down. At the very least, I want to get to what you would really consider the base of the trunk, which is often, like I said, in these nursery situations, buried somewhat. Okay, so all these the roots you might be seeing here, they're growing back up out of the pot. They're not really coming right off of the trunk here. Okay, that's probably good enough. In many trees, you can see the upper reaches of big roots, lateral roots that come off the trunk. You kind of want to emphasize those and show them off. This tree doesn't really have anything in particular in that regard, so we'll just consider this the base. Okay, and this is not also a particularly thick tree. When you select trees for bonsai, to give that illusion of age, you want to have the thickest trunk you can possibly have at the base, and a very strong what's called taper. Okay, so a nice regular taper from that thick base to the terminus of the tree, wherever it may be. All right, so this tree again it's not bad, okay, but it's not particularly impressive in that regard. Okay, so now that we have that kind of cleaned up a little bit down there, there's a few principles about bonsai, and that I'll try to mention along the way. Again, we want to create the illusion of an older tree, and that's going to involve pulling some of these branches down and wiring them into place. Okay, so they grow in a more parallel or even drooping condition. Okay, we're also going to remove a lot of branches and needles, and because this is too thick and dense, we want to get a good visual of the trunk, at least part of the way, which is part of the appeal of bonsai. Okay, now, the other thing you need to do before you do any of that is sort of decide what's going to be the front of your tree. Okay, you want to look for a nice, some sort of appeal, curving type appeal or aesthetic appeal to the trunk, and that be your front that people would view, immediately. And then emphasize that, okay? Reveal the trunk and show it off somewhat. So this tree has a little bit of a curving trunk. Okay, it bends to the right and then back to the left, then a little bit back to the right again. And it has a real gentle, natural S curve to it. And having S curves is something that people often try to achieve in bonsai, but it's not absolutely required. But yeah, I think that would be a good front right here. Okay, there's a nice curve to the right, and then a little bit back to the left and back to the right. Okay, so what we're going to do next then is start to select branches to keep and branches to remove. All right, and you know, branches. There's a couple of rules there. You don't want too many branches coming out of one particular point on the trunk. You don't want, you want spacing. You want good spacing between the levels that you choose to have in your tree. And you don't want branches that are too thick and too large, okay? Because again, you want the illusion of a large tree, a naturally large tree that has kind of thinner branches, and that gives you that illusion of a large tree, an old tree, if you have a thick trunk with relatively thin branches coming off of it. All right, not super thin, but relatively thin. So big, heavy, thick branches are not that desirable in bonsai. All right, so just looking around at various choices here. This is really heavily branched, so we're going to end up probably taking off half of these branches or so. And okay, the other thing is that if this will be the front of our bonsai, the front should be, the trunk should be revealed. Okay, it should be visible to some extent. And so that means you can't have any branches coming straight out the front, right, especially right at the base. Okay, you kind of want your initial branches, your lowest branches, to be on either side, kind of reaching a little bit toward the front, but as though the tree is giving you a hug. Okay, that's the idea. And that means we'd select a branch from this side, maybe a branch from this side, remove the ones coming straight at us at that lower point, and then end up removing a lot in between. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at that and see what we can do. And again, we're going to wire some branches as well. And you can move branches into positions where you'd like them to be. But if you have a branch that's dead center, like this one, I think we're going to have to remove just because it's right coming straight out the front. So I'm going to remove that one. And see what we have. Okay, we're starting to open things up a little bit there. Okay, tiny little branches that'll never become useful, you remove. You tend to remove branches that droop or twigs that droop, point downward. I'm going to remove a lot of little stuff in here just to clean this tree up. It's kind of what you call it. The very initial go round is just you clean up the tree. You get rid of little stuff. You get rid of dead twigs, dead branches. Make some very early, quick decisions. So this is very densely foliated. Just sort of open it up, and you end up taking off a lot of foliage. We're also going to pull out some live needles. I'll explain that in a minute. If you have two branches coming out of the same position, you basically have to make a decision. You can't have them both. You want to remove any little branches that are coming out of the angles of the branches with the main trunk, kind of coming out of the crotches, so to speak. Okay, I'll just keep working my way up. We have a decision here. There's a thicker branch would be heading toward the back, which we might keep. Okay, the idea is we're going to pull some of these branches down. And then you create pads with the branches. You sort of flatten out the branch and you create the illusion of a green pad of foliage, all right, that's just visually appealing. All right, so here's an example. These might be our first two branches, our first two pads might look something like that, okay? So let me just get a little bit more cleanup and then we'll do a little bit of wiring and show you how to do that. You know, again, this is something that I just got interested in the last few years. I've spent hours and hours watching YouTube videos about how to do bonsai. And there's a few favorites that I have. I like, for example, Heron's Bonsai out of Great Britain. That's done by Peter Chan. And so he produces a lot of very helpful and entertaining bonsai videos. So that's a fave. We're also going to be sort of removing a lot of needles and little twigs from these branches so that there is some distance, some open branch length before you get to the first lateral branches off of the main branches, okay? You can cut these little twigs or pull them off. Just try not to peel too much bark. Okay. And some of this can be done at the end, just sort of in the final touches phase. Okay, so here, what I think I will do now is I will wire our first two sets of branches. Okay, and just to give you an indication of how do you do that. All right, what I have over here, again, my goal is to make this as user-friendly and affordable for anybody. You know, you can buy all kinds of expensive bonsai products, special bonsai wire, all the tools, special soil mixes and things. But this is a wire you can get from any, main hardware store. It's called annealed copper. And you can get this in lengths of 3 or 5 feet in coils with multiple strands. And it's annealed copper is pretty flexible. Okay, but then it's kind of hardens up as you use it. All right, so it more or less is a very cheap alternative from aluminum bonsai wire, which is often used as well. Okay, now when we wire a tree, more or less what we're going to do is wrap this wire around the trunk for a firm support and then coil it around the branches and use that wire then to bend them into shape and hold them in place. Okay, so you want to cut the wire. You can trim it later, of course, but cut the wire long enough to do the lengths of branches you want to wire ahead of time. And then it's always good to try to choose 2 branches that you're going to wire at the same time. Okay, so here are 2 that we're going to wire, and we're going to put the anchor point in the middle and pull coil wire out on this branch, and then likewise over there. So I have a length of wire I think will do it. And this is soft wire. You can use these same branch cutters to cut the wire. I just lost it. Okay, so there's my annealed copper wire, and we'll basically take the center of it and just wrap it around as an anchor point. So I'm going to coil it out, this one first. Okay, you want to hold the branch as you coil so that you don't run the risk of breaking the branch. And just sort of try not to smash too much foliage on the way, and take it out as far as you need to get the necessary function out of the wire, okay, to hold down the parts that you want to have held down. And so that means it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole way out to the tip of this branch, you know, because if you wire the main thick part, it's going to bring the rest of the branch down as well. Okay, and I'll take this out that way. That's probably good enough. Okay, and then there's all kinds of things you can do with wire. You can bend branches and put them in a place where you'd like them to be. You can twist branches. You can shorten a branch by sort of forcing your wire into an S shape and making your branch take that S shape. And you can shorten the length of a branch. Okay, so again, these two branches are going to represent our oldest branches on the tree. Okay, they've been around the longest, and they're drooping a little bit now. And we'll come back and sort of trim it all up in the end. But there's our first wiring. Okay. Now we're going to have to pull some stuff down in the back as well. We have a few choices there. There's a few branches that are close together. Okay, like here's one right here that's sort of in between, and it's just a little too close to some other branches I think I want to keep. So I'm going to take that one out because I can pull this branch down in position. All right, so remove that. Thing about bonsai too is, you can trim stuff, and even if you make a mistake, more branches are going to grow. As long as the tree is healthy, it will bud out, and you'll end up trimming it repeatedly through its life. So you can fix things in the end. All right, so it's forgiving in that regard. Okay, so I'm going to keep that one. And again, you don't want to pull our next branch down just parallel above the other one. You want to kind of offset them. In fact, these two, to get back to my principle about the hugging aspect, I can pull them a little bit toward the front, okay, to be our first greeting, first introduction to this tree. Okay, pull them a little bit to the front, like that. Okay, and that gives more room to pull a branch down into that kind of position. Okay. A large branch in the back we're going to keep because it'll help fill in. You want your bonsai to be attractive from all angles, but again, the viewer should be drawn first to the front. But you do need things to come out the back. You need to care about what the back looks like as well. Okay, and so we're going to deal with that next. This is a very thick, dense branch. I'm going to thin it down. Open it up. Remove the small interior twigs. Okay, anything that's drooping, we don't really need it. We're going to pull this branch down and make a kind of a flat pad of foliage out of it. In fact, this has a very large branch I'm going to take off. There. Take off a big chunk like that because there's plenty of foliage on this branch. In fact, there's too much. So then you have things like this where there's two things right close to each other. You don't need them both. remove anything that's drooping down and also anything that's sticking up. Like here's one that we can remove that's sticking up. Okay. There's a little bit too dense here. Let's see. I'll take this one off. Okay. Okay, that'll make a nice pad heading toward the back. All right, kind of like that. And so, let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead and wire that. I think we'll wire that in conjunction with that one. Again, this is toward the back now. So let's get another little length of wire. My wire fell over here. I'm trying to do this relatively quickly to fit it all in, but bonsai is something that, I mean, it's a great pastime when you just have a couple hours to kill and you just want to take your time and think about things. It's very relaxing. I find it very relaxing both to do it and to watch the bonsai videos, frankly. And but normally you don't need to rush it. Okay, we'll wrap this around here first. This little branch we're going to keep, and we're going to pull it away. This annealed copper is soft, but it's not super soft, so it takes a little bit of elbow grease. Move that one into position over there, and then wrap this around the tree. And use it to wire this one down. Okay, this one kind of has a fork in it, but I think if we come out one fork, we'll be able to handle both. Okay. Yeah. It's a little bit of a thicker branch. You know, as you're bending branches, you just have to be careful that you don't break anything. All right, so let's take a look at how things are shaping up. This one, I think I want to twist a little bit back in that direction. There's some unnecessary foliage here as well. Okay, but that's the start of things. Okay, I'm going to bend this one a little bit. You want nice balance, space filling. All right, so let's keep going. Again, there's always way more foliage and branches than you're gonna need. You really just have to go for it, not worry about cutting things. Obviously, there are mistakes you can make that really will set a tree back or really influence its shape and style going forward that you have to be aware of. Like, deciding what your main leader will be. That's an important decision. Even though you can regenerate a leader from a secondary or lateral branch, you can really affect the growth pattern of your tree depending on what you decide to keep and what you decide to cut. But in general, these trees are pretty forgiving. Let's see. This is one that I think we'll keep and flatten out. It has a lot of foliage to it. Again, the idea with the pads is, again, a nice flat, like a landing pad, right? And that's just a visually appealing thing. kind of want the foliage to spray out and come back to a point. It's been described as like a herringbone. Again, this has a lot of foliage, a little bit more than we need. Okay, that's what we're going to do with that one. And then here's its partner right here. Okay, we will also keep. Okay, again, it's a lot of extra branches that we'll get rid of. These inner branches end up dying anyhow, because as this tree would grow, if it were allowed to grow normally, they would get shaded out. So they wouldn't even be able to make it anyhow. Okay, that'll be our pad there. Okay, that's our next set. To be honest, I watched a lot of videos before I really dove into trying to finally do this for the first time. And you know, you just kind of have to do it. I had some trees I had been playing around with in this semi-bonsai style without doing any wiring or really understanding just the, you know, having a vision for what the tree I wanted it to look like. And so, but you know, just a few years ago, I decided to just dive into it, and it's been fun. I like it. And you know, if you get good at it, you can sell these things, and they can be worth a lot of money, actually. But I like the artistic aspect of the creative aspect of bonsai. It's, for me, it blends my you know, my interests in art and creativity with the natural world. You know, I'm trying to mimic nature here and produce a tree that looks like like as I've said repeatedly now, old and gnarly. You know, that's survived in an environment exposed to the elements for maybe 100 years. And I'm going to give the illusion of that in a half an hour here. So I think that's kind of fun. But then just the aesthetic aspects of bonsai, what is appealing to you and to people, you know, is just, it's really art, you know. It's in the eye of the beholder somewhat, but there are various things that just people find appealing. It's like, how good of a job did you do at fooling me into thinking this is an old and large tree? And does it give you good feelings when you look at it? Okay. That has to do with its shape and the curves of the tree and the trunk. I'm going to come back and shape these pads a little bit more so I can get through this. But okay, there's several levels we've gotten up now. Okay, I want to pull, at some point you can start to pull some a little bit more toward the front and twist these things into place. Okay, so let's keep on going. Obviously, as you get up near the top, you start to run out of larger branches to play with, but of course that's what the tree is like in nature too, so that's normal. here's some I'm going to pull down toward the back. Here's a few I'm deciding here what to do. Okay, this one, we need something. It'd be a kind of a large gap if we took all this out. I think I'll take this one out, pull this down. Because I can pull this into place there. And then get up above. Keep that, I think. Keep something over there. Okay. I think I will select that. Let's see. Select the larger branch above that and pull that down into this area. Fill that in. Save that one. Try to open this up a little bit just to see what I'm working with up here. Again, it gets very dense and stuff just simply has to go. But you can't really see all that until you get into it. And by the way, you see that you always start at the bottom and work your way up from the bottom. Okay, you don't start at the top. You're kind of building the tree from the base. There's a lot of, dense foliage in here, too much. This is a very tactile thing too, so that satisfies some of that kind of thing, just to get your hands on something and work with it, which is appealing to people. There's a sound aspect of bonsai. And that is the sound of the clippers clipping things. People find appealing. It's just part of the process. And the smell. Okay, right now this nice Alberta spruce is giving off real nice holiday vibes. I can smell it. Giving off its terpenoid, its bouquet of terpenoids. Okay, that a lot of people know as essential oils. All right, so it's releasing volatile compounds from this damage I'm doing, and those compounds smell nice. Okay, for the plant they might be defenses. In many cases they are, but we often think of these essential oils and the compounds terpenoids that is their actual name. We like them. We use them for their smell, for their antimicrobial activities. It's for decorations, holiday. It's the smell of the holidays, actually. So but for the plant, it's defense. Of course, these conifers often have resins too. A lot of these terpenoids will be in the form of resins. Sap, sticky. I have it on my fingers right now. That's a consequence of working on these things, but that's all right. It'll come off. Okay, I'm just doing a lot of cleanup and trimming, and then I'm going to come back and wire a bunch of stuff in a row here to shape things. I'm just deciding on, you want to avoid branches that are directly parallel of each other and right on top of each other. You should select one over the other, or at least pull one out of the way of the other. Yeah, just branches that are plain old too close together. Just take a look at a big mature tree. There's some spacing between the branches, and which you don't see so much on the young tree. And so this is kind of what we're trying to achieve here. And then these pads are too dense as well. They have too many little branchlets coming off of them. They need to be cleaned up. So I'm doing that along the way here too. And again, we're going to pull needles off these inner branches to give the appearance of a bare branch until you get out some distance to the foliage. Come back and do more of that later. I think I need to take that one out of there. Okay, just getting some space, choosing branches. We'll wait to decide what to do with the top. There's a few options for that. And that includes, just keeping a nice primary terminal branch up there, so it looks just like your standard Christmas tree. Or to make a shortened, kind of like the appearance of a tree that's lost its top. It's been broken, perhaps. There's a lot of features in bonsai you can emphasize that include literally damaging the tree, scarring it, creating hollow spots, broken branches that are debarked. And that's called shari. It's more or less scarring, okay, from the ravages of age and the weather and things like that. And so that all adds to the appeal. I wasn't planning to do that on this tree. This is kind of our formal upright. Okay, there's all kinds of different styles of bonsai too. Like I said, this is going to be considered basically a formal upright, which is more or less a straight tree. It's just styled into position. But there's an informal upright that usually has a lean to it a little bit, or more of a curve to it. There are cascading styles of bonsai where the tree, starts here and cascades down. There are styles with two trunks. There are styles with just sort of a brushy, like brush broom appearance to the top. There's really no end to the kinds of styles you can have. And I guess the end is the limits of your own creativity. It's been kind of my goal is to make at least one bonsai of all the known primary styles. And I have double trunks, I have cascades, I have formal uprights, I have informal uprights. So I'll show you more of those with time. But yeah, let's try to get this one done before we get carried away. Okay, there we go. We're getting a lot of nice spacing now. Open this up. Again, you can prune really any time, but off season in the winter is a good time to prune. The tree's basically going to be dormant here over the winter, and then it'll pick up growing in the spring again. So you can prune in the winter, but it's not as good to root prune in the winter, leaving the roots in the moist soil with exposed cut ends without growing actively. So that's not necessarily a good thing. Okay. Okay, I think now I'm going to work on some wiring. Try to put some of these things in place. These are smaller branches. They need smaller wires, essentially. So let's see what I can do there. Okay, so I jumped ahead a little bit, and I cleaned this area out up here, which is very dense. And then I'm going to finish just by making some last minute decisions here about what to do with the apex of this bonsai. Now, for the thickness of this trunk, this is an awfully tall tree. Okay, so to give an illusion of age, we want to reduce the height of this tree so that its height kind of matches its trunk diameter. So this is really too tall. And it also has two main leaders, okay, that are competing with each other. All right, so too tall, two competing leaders, something has to be done up there. But then notice this branch right here. It's almost completely upright. What I think would look nice with this tree is to select that as the leader, okay, and just remove these two, and that will effectively shorten the tree, keep a central leader present, okay, but reduce the height and strength of the apical meristem there, the apex, and we'll make a new terminus. Another option with trees like this is you can cut them off at the top, sort of like the tree I showed you at the very beginning. That gives you the illusion that the top is broken off. With this one though, I think this leader right here will do. So what I'm going to do is remove these two branches right here, and we're going to basically favor a new leader, and we'll wire it so it stands completely upright. So that it now takes over the leadership position for the whole tree. Okay, so it now will become the apical meristem for the whole tree, but it is leaning a little bit. Okay, so we are going to straighten it up with some wire so that it is now the new top of this tree. And then we'll spread some of these supporting branches out below it and remove a bunch of needles. And that's going to more or less, I think, wrap up what we're going to do with this tree. So I'm going to remove a few more. I've took a lot out of this already, a lot of small twigs and needles. I'll come back with a finer trimming tool to get some of these things later, but I just want to give you the main features here. Okay, we'll spread these out, remove some of them. Here's another one we'll remove. Okay. Again, this is, this is our front. Okay, so we're going to make sure things are pulled down and out. Okay, what I'm going to do too is also select some smaller, softer wire with these very small branches, which I'm going to wrap around here. So it's a little easier to work with smaller branches. So this is actually aluminum bonsai wire. I have a little bit of it. And again, like I said, it's not necessary, but it's you can use it if you want. So I'm going to pull a couple of branches, just quickly cross over here, retain some of these small branches. This one down here. This aluminum wire is a little easier to bend than the copper wire I've been using. That's one reason to use it on these small branches. Just easier to work. Okay, now one thing about with the tree is you go from the bottom to the top, the branches go from sort of drooping at the bottom to kind of being parallel in the middle to being maybe slightly angled up at the top. And that's the natural growth form of these trees. So these up here, I won't have them droop quite as much. I want to select what I want to keep here. Still one or two too many, I think. That one, I'm not sure if that one's necessary right there. Yeah, we'll take that out. Okay. That'll be our new apex. Spread these out. Some of these may not even need to be wired. That's always a possibility. Obviously, you have to be more careful with these small branches. They're more prone to breakage. Now, conifers are very forgiving. They're very flexible. So you don't have to worry as much with something like these spruces. Up to the back a little bit. Now that one, like I said, we will wire this to be a little straighter because it has a little bit of a lean to it. Pull out some of these needles. It makes these branches have the appearance of being older than they actually are. Including the terminus. All right, just a little bit more wire. That'll be done. I think 2 more pieces will do it. This. Now you leave these wires on basically for several months. It takes a while for these conifers to grow, so you need to leave the wire on a little longer than you do with a hardwood species, deciduous tree species. I'll probably leave them on for a good bit of the upcoming growing season this year. And then you basically take them off, and presumably by that point, the branches have grown, they've toughened up, and they'll retain the position that you've put them in for the last several months. Okay, I think some of these others get a little wire. Get even smaller with them. This is kind of a little bit of a clustered mess up here with how many wires are wrapped around this single point, but this is kind of a critical spot. And by the way, this is about as tall as this tree is going to stay the rest of its life. So, you know, people, you talk to people about trees in pots, and they ask, well, how large is it going to get? And you basically, it's as large as you want them to get, and then you can keep them the same size by pruning their entire life. It's not like planting a tree in the ground that, you know, has a kind of a genetically determined size and age to it. Plant in a pot is, you know, in training, essentially. You have control of it. And you can prune it and have it stay whatever size and shape you want it to be. That includes even plants that aren't bonsais, technically, just you know, landscape plants for your deck, front yard. So, okay, I'm just going to wire this into place a little bit. Just needs a little bit. You have to, you know, plants have a trajectory, a growth trajectory. And if we were to let this tree go without any wiring, it would have an angle to it as it continued to grow. Okay, so I'm going to just straighten it up just a slight bit, but it's necessary to keep that completely upright, which is how I'd like it to be. I mean, you can make a style where that terminus is not completely upright, but that's not what we're going for here. So okay, so I'm going to anchor it just down here a little bit. There's a lot of wire here, so it's going to look like a mess there for a while. Okay, that's sufficient, and we're just going to bend it so that it's completely upright. I lost track of what the front of the tree was. Okay, folks, there you have it. I went back and pulled out a few more needles. I'll certainly refine this with time. And eventually we'll have to prune it, and then we'll repot it probably in the late winter, early spring. But there you have our formal upright bonsai made from a dwarf Alberta spruce. Hopefully this is done in a way that, you know, just about anybody could do. It's how I learned, more or less. So we started with something that looked like that. Okay. Nursery grown dwarf Alberta spruce, and turned it into our formal upright Christmas tree style bonsai. Okay. With that, I'm going to sign off and wish you all a good holiday season, and see you again. Bye-bye.